Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we have an open Q&A, so just whatever questions we've got coming in, mainly focusing in on A Song of Ice and Fire. Quick apologies if you watched these live. Last week I was unfortunately not well, which is why we didn't have it, but hopefully we can make up for that this time. I've asked for some questions from my patrons. I will work my way through them. I will pick up on as much as I can in the chat as we go through. As I'm recording this, today I believe is Thanksgiving in America. So if you are watching this sneakily in between seeing your family, or if you're watching this back a little bit later, if you're celebrating in America, then happy Thanksgiving to you. But let's just go straight into the questions. Per Marcus Rossman saying, hello from a chilly north where snow is raining down right now. I wanted to ask, what do you think will happen if the Mandleys get their hands on Rickon and then go over to Stannis? A lot is uncertain, but could George R. R. Martin be setting up a stark civil war if Robb's will finds its way to the wall and Davos succeeds in his endeavour? Or perhaps Stannis dies and Davos joins Jon, as in the show. Seven blessings to you all and to the moderators. Well, yeah, I'm sort of covering this in a series of videos at the moment, which is looking at what we sometimes rather loosely call the Great Northern Conspiracy, which is basically the fact that the way that the North is set up right now, the Boltons, yes, they're in control. They've got the Freys there supporting them. The Lannisters, theoretically, though the Lannisters are a long way away. But then you've got all these other northern houses who aren't too happy about that, to put it quite lightly. In some cases, some of them are absolutely livid. Almost everybody has lost somebody at the Red Wedding. Almost everybody blames the Boltons and the Freys. And a lot of them are plotting one way or another to oust the Boltons. Now, the big issue is they don't each know who they can trust. Nobody really knows who's on whose side, and so they've all got to kind of like suss each other out. And crucially, what George R. R. Martin has done is he has set up this situation where there's a sort of a stark succession crisis going on. As far as the world as a whole is concerned, the Starks have gone. That's it. They're gone. Ned obviously is dead. Everyone knows that Robb is dead as well. Bran and Rickon have both gone missing, though the official story being told by most people and believed by the majority of people as well, is that Theon killed Bran and Rickon. Then Arya has gone completely missing, and Sansa has gone missing, but she's also married to Tyrion Lannister, technically, so nobody wants a Lannister in charge. So the Starks have gone, which is how the Boltons can stake a claim to Winterfell. They marry Ramsay over to fake Arya, Jane Poole, telling everybody that this is Arya, and that is how they've created this new house, House Bolton of Winterfell. They now claim Winterfell. So what has happened, though, is we've got this situation underlying all of this where Robb obviously knew that that there was a risk after he discovered about Bran and Rickon. Once he knew Arya had disappeared, there was a risk that he would die childless, and so he drew up his will. And his will, as far as we can tell, we didn't actually read it, but it's pretty clear. The will put legitimized Jon and made him Robb's heir. So that's what one set of people north of the wall believe. Jon is the rightful heir. Then you have got Littlefinger, who is very clearly here trying to focus in on getting Sansa to be the heir to Winterfell. She is, he tells her quite openly to her face what his plan is that he is going to get her, he's going to marry her off to Harry the heir, and then unveil her as Sansa Stark, and everybody's going to be up in arms, and they will follow her to reclaim her rightful place in Winterfell. That's his plan. We know that Lord Manderley has sent Davos to go and collect Rickon, knowing that Rickon, having heard from Wex that Rickon is over on Skagos. So that's another potential Stark being brought in to be ruling Winterfell. Bran himself is actually, technically, if everybody knew it, he is the heir. But he's gone missing. At some point, he will also return south. So lots of different Starks, lots of different claims. Is George R. R. Martin setting up a succession crisis? And I think the short answer, to kind of short circuit those videos, is yes, but I don't think he is setting up conflict between the Starks. I think he is setting up a conflict between the people who are supporting each of the individual Starks, which is a subtle but I think quite important difference. Yeah, probably the first to appear will be Rickon. The timings are a little bit hard to work out exactly. It has to be said, but when you get towards the end of A Dance with Dragons, actually you'll find Davos's chapters they end just over halfway through, and the rest of the plot carries on for a little while. And if you try and work out the exact timing of all of these things, after he's gone, then Wyman Manderley heads his way all the way up to Winterfell, and then he's there for a little while. Davos has actually had a good few months, probably maybe 3 or 4 months, to try to get to Skagos, to try to find Rickon and get back. So he might be appearing on the scene earlier than you might otherwise think. Second may well be Jon, depending on how long. Yes, we know he got stabbed at the very end of A Dance with Dragons, but assuming he returns, we don't know how long that will be, but he will appear at some point. Sansa, it looks as though she's probably got a good few chapters into the Winds of Winter before they even start heading north. And Bran as well is probably going to be there for a while. So this will be, they're not all going to converge at the same time. This will be quite a slow motion succession crisis. But then we are going to get people who are trying to work out who do they actually wish to be supporting. So the Boltons will be removed, and then we're going to get this sort of infighting. But it's not going to be, I think, between the Starks themselves. Buttoned up reader 6522 saying, by freeing Vel from Stannis' captivity, has Jon stolen her? And do the free folk potentially see them as engaged? What role will she have in the Winds of Winter? Yeah, so we get Jon has Val, for those who don't know, because she's a book-only character, Val is the sister of Dalla, who was the mother of Mance Rayder's child. She died, and so Val was basically there looking after the baby. There was the whole baby swap thing that Jon Snow did, but she stayed around at Castle Black because Stannis kind of captured her, because he thought of her as a wildling princess, because he couldn't quite, in fact, very few of the people south of the wall can quite get their heads around the idea that the king beyond the wall is not a king in the southern sense of the word. He's just there by acclamation. His children do not take over from him, but people like Stannis could not understand this, and so that's why she's been captured, because she's this wildling princess in their minds. Now, she's a very strong-willed woman. It is very clear. She's also very beautiful. A lot of people trying to test out the waters. Might they perhaps be able to marry her? Then they could be sort of a wildling prince, whatever the thinking there is. Jon releases her. After Stannis is gone, Jon releases her to go north of the wall to go hunting for some more wildlings, for Tormund in particular. And so the question is, does this mean that he has, in a kind of a wildling custom way, stolen her, because he has taken her from from Stannis's captivity? I think the answer is no. There's no implication. I was reading that section just relatively recently. There's no implication there that I can remember that she goes in the same way that you got Ygritte, who was very clearly, you've stolen me now. What are you going to do about this? She doesn't seem to be of that mind. Added to which, he has not stolen her and taken her somewhere. He's just released her and said, go. So I don't think that there's any clear implication there. As for what role she will have, I think that the biggest role she probably will have is in relation to Shireen. And this will probably be quite a tragedy because she has been the most outspoken person in saying Shireen, who's got grayscale, remember, it's in remittance, hasn't been spreading or anything for quite some time. But Val's there saying it doesn't go away. She should have been killed. And she is at the moment the only person who is at the wall very clearly and specifically saying Shireen should be killed. And we're expecting Shireen to be set with John. George R. R. Martin has basically told us that, yes, that Shireen sacrifice will happen. And so we should be looking for people who will be coming out in support of this. And she will probably be one of the people who is leading the argument in favor of her being sacrificed. So I think that is probably, in terms of swaying people's minds on the subject, that is probably her strongest role. Ranabir Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and lovely Dan the dog. I need your help on a theory I'm trying to formulate in relation to Aegon the Conqueror's crown. Who has it? And they will see it resurface in the winds of winter. We last see it being lost when the young dragon, that's Deeren the First, goes through the Boneway back into Dawn to curb the Second Uprising. He gets double-crossed and killed in the peace negotiations, and the Dragon Knight gets captured by House Will. If you look at the Boneway, its path is flanked by House Will in the north and House Ironwood in the south. House Ironwood have been against the Martells and Targaryens in 3 of the 5 Blackfire rebellions. So could they have taken the crown and planned to crown Daemon Blackfire if his rebellion was a success? There's a case that House Ironwood would have given this crown to Bittersteel and the Golden Company, such that eventually it's back in Illyrio's possession, just like the sword Blackfire. Another option is House Martell being the ruling family collecting the crown, and that the crown is kept by Doran for all this time. This does not sit well with me, because there's been no indication in the text that he has it, contrasting to Illyrio mentioning that he might have a sword for young Griff in the deleted lines from A Dance with Dragons. John Connington is seeking to get House Martell support for the Fagon cause because the entire marketing for this campaign is that he is Rhaegar's son rather than a Blackfire. House Martell has never supported a Blackfire cause, but rather House Ironwood has. What do you think? Does House Ironwood have it? House Martell, Illyrio, Golden Company? I'm confused as to who has the crown. I'd love your help. And then you sort of say, you're pretty sure it'll be Dany who wears it, as she has all the symbols of the Conqueror, rather than Fagon, who's aiming to be Rhaegar Targaryen. Come again. Right, so this is an interesting one. For the overall context here, the Targaryens didn't just have a crown that all of their kings were crowned with. There was Aegon the Conqueror's crown, which is what we're talking about here. There was at least 2 more that I can think of off the top of my head. Jaehaerys the First, he had his own crown made. And so there is no one crown. However, if you had to pick a crown to be like, here's the symbol of Targaryen kingship, then you probably would say Aegon the Conqueror's crown. That, however, was lost. It was lost when Deeren the First, and just to kind of like, so you're clear on where this is. This is the generation below the Dance of the Dragons generation. So you get the younger generation, the Aegons, Aegon the Second, Aegon the Third, Viserys. That generation, their children we're talking about here. So we get Deeren the First, who invades Dawn and wins, and then goes away, and then Dawn, as it does, rises up, and so he goes back in to take it down again. When he goes back in, there's this big peace meeting, and he does, according to the reports we've not heard both sides of this, but he does get double-crossed, and he dies, and the crown is not heard from again. We don't know where it goes. And that was 150 years ago, something along those lines. So where might it be? Well, the implication has to be it was taken. This wasn't smuggled away by somebody in the Seven Kingdoms and brought back, or we would have heard of that. So it stayed in Dawn. Now, the boring possibility is somebody just took it. As with all of these things, and a lot of the Valyrian steel swords that we hear about that go missing during time, this was worth a lot. There were rubies in it and everything. This was very expensive. You could sell it and its constituent parts for a huge amount of money. So anyone could potentially have taken it. The theory that you're working through here is this idea that someone took it and then kept hold of it so that at some point in the future they could give it to a king that they wanted. I quite like this idea, but you do have to sort of put the little asterisk next to it and say, well, if this is the Martells or the Dornish more broadly, why didn't they, when the Dornish were married into the royal family, which they were not too long after this, surely by that point, when they've actually properly bought themselves in, they would have presented the crown and said, look, here, we've kept hold of this. Now we want, our heir, because it was the Targaryen family tree that we know now has got Dornish ancestry and blood in it. Their heir was sitting on the throne. So why didn't they? Well, I think the answer is because they didn't have it. Now, my best guess is that, yes, this is going to make an appearance, and it will make an appearance with Illyrio, who has been splashing the cash, getting all of these things that could be seen to be legitimate or legitimizers of his claim to the throne. So we think Blackfire, the sword Blackfire, will make a reappearance. He's already distributed to Dany the dragon eggs, which again would be a sign of legitimacy. So it kind of makes sense that there is a crown there that he would want his candidate to be crowned with. So how did it make its way there? Perhaps somebody sold it and he found it. This is one of those things where we simply do not have the information. So if I had to say, either it is just missing and it's just one of those things, George R. Martin won't tell us anymore, or if it makes an appearance, it doesn't, unless we've given some good reason, it doesn't make sense to me that any of the houses you mention, kept hold of it for all of that time when Dornish people were on the throne of the Seven Kingdoms, when, as you say, perhaps they were supporting the Blackfire pretender, why they didn't give them that crown. There seems to be no reason for us to believe that they would have held on to these things when there were opportunities for them to use it. So those are the two biggest options that I can see. Colton Roberts Colton Roberts 3, saying, I love your content. Will you still be re-releasing your Roberts Rebellion playlist? It is my favorite and I miss it. I will, yes. I was thinking about this the other day. So I've said for quite a long time, I've been holding off on re-releasing it because I want to redo it, and I want to redo it ideally in the light of the Winds of Winter. I'm not holding out for the Winds of Winter before re-releasing it, but we do have the stage play, The Iron Throne, which will be based at the Turning at Harrenhal, and we will learn things from that. So I've been holding off on that. The fact of the matter is, though, that we haven't heard anything about that for a while. I think it's still going ahead. I've not heard that it's not happening, but it's when George R. Martin now 2 years in a row has sort of said, well, he's hoping it will happen at some point in the next year. It hasn't. So there's a pause and a delay for reasons we don't know. So what I will probably do is start re-releasing a few of the earlier ones, or on other ones that are more standalone. And if we do get the stage play, and if that does reveal a bit more information, then I will be releasing the things related to more related to the tourney itself at that moment. Just have a quick flick into the chat. Buttoned up reader saying being crowned with the Conqueror's crown does really go a long way towards setting up a second Dance of the Dragons, mirroring the other events of Fire and Blood. Yeah, absolutely. And Clark Clarsnock saying I haven't heard a play update in ages. I hope it's still going forward. Yeah, I haven't heard either. What I'm hoping is that George R. Martin, this is not a thing that he seemingly does as it's January, I must do this. But usually some point in the early part of a year, he does give a sort of a blog post with a little bit more of a step back and sort of say how he's getting on, what he's doing, where his priorities are, something along those lines. Not as I say, not as kind of a formal thing, but I think like everybody, when you get to the new year, as the long winter nights are drawing on, and you're thinking about the year coming, it does sort of seem to send his mind in the same way as ours, and just sort of think, well, where am I going? What's happening this next year? And so perhaps we will get an update. It's not a guarantee, but it would be quite nice. Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying, hello, Robert and Dan. I hope all is jolly. It is, thank you. Can you please speak on Euron Greyjoy's heterochromia? Was he born with two different coloured eyes, or has something caused this? And why do you think he keeps his black eye concealed? Thank you. Yeah, so this is a mystery. George R. Martin hasn't told us. So he has an eye patch, and we're told very clearly that the eye that you can see is a blue eye, and it's referred to as this smiling eye. The other one, that we know from Theon's POV, for example, when he sees another character with an eye patch, and it kind of gives him these flashbacks to Euron, and he's sort of saying, well, he hopes that that underneath that it doesn't have the same black. I think the phrase is a black eye shining with malice. So, and obviously he's known as the Crow's Eye. So, what's going on? Was he always like that? As I say, we don't know. George R. Martin hasn't told us. The clear symbolism and imagery is there. Yes, there's the piratical thing going on with the eye patch, but also there's a lot of one-eyed characters in this world who tend more than most to be slightly more independent-minded, perhaps slightly crueler. Thinking about characters like Aemond Targaryen from the Dance of the Dragons, we also get characters like Bloodraven, who only has the one eye. What I think, as George R. Martin hasn't given us the full detail of this, to the extent that he's left it open, this idea that it is just maybe there's like a bit of dragon glass in there or something like that, a black eye shining with malice. You could read the few references we've got as sort of suggesting that as well. I don't think so. I think it is just two eyes. Probably he was born with it. The fact that he covers one, though, unlike most characters who've got a covered eye, it's because they've lost an eye. If he hasn't lost an eye, if he was born with two eyes with different colours, the implication is that he is trying to hide something. He's trying to cover something up. And the thing he was hiding is this malice-filled black eye. He's got a smiling eye to the world. I mean, the world doesn't see him as a particularly smiling character, but his eye that the world sees is not his full character. There's another side to him, which is a darker side. So that is what it is. As is always the way with George R. R. Martin, I think we shouldn't worry so much about the detail of what's going on with the character so much as what he is trying to reveal to us about the character, as in not the detail of why that is like that, but what he's trying to reveal to us about the character. Let's go to Corvus Corax saying, good evening, Robert, Dan, and all. My question this evening is, what will the North look like at the end of the book? Especially considering that we vaguely know that John goes north at the end of it all. If the wall doesn't just fail but falls, what will be considered the North? Will the Warden or King hold sway over current lands and beyond the wall? Will the Night's Watch still exist if the others are no more? And thank you for all you do. I'm loving In Deep Sleep. Yeah, if you enjoyed these live streams, then they appear a few weeks later. I'm going to aim for about 3 weeks later on In Deep Sleep, which is the sister channel and a newer thing. I've just leaned into this idea. Some people like to fall asleep to these live streams. And I will also be doing a few other things. I'll experiment a little bit, maybe some videos from the main channel, maybe a few stories from the well-told tale, but designed to help people get to sleep. So with the soothing background sounds and visuals, the video going on for 8 hours. Even after I've finished talking, the video will carry on. No adverts in the middle. That's the idea. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. If you are watching this on In Deep Sleep, then I hope you get a good night's sleep. But in terms of what will the North be like, I think it's always a bit hard to say with these kinds of things because we don't know exactly what's going to be, what will happen at the end of the books. But I think we can be reasonably certain that whoever is left of the wildlings, they will not wish to bend the knee to whoever happens to be king or lord in the north, south of the wall. Whatever the situation is, they did not want to, even when the others were bearing down on them. So the idea, once the threat of the others has been dealt with, the idea that they might suddenly wish to bend the knee to whoever happens to be in charge, that doesn't seem to work for me. So and also similarly, or coming from a different angle, when John heads north, assuming he does at the very end of this story, that's my working assumption on what happens. I think that's one of the things that the show probably did get right, is at the very end of it all, he heads north. That has a richer tone to it, in my view. It makes a lot more sense if he is going away from the lands, the Seven Kingdoms, which had caused him so much pain, and towards or into a land where there is no king. There's no Game of Thrones going on. So that kind of works. That's still there. Will the wall still be there? I've got a question on this in just one moment, so I won't go into too much detail. But might the Night's Watch still exist? I see no reason why some of the Night's Watch aren't still there. Are we ever going to be fully 100% certain that the others won't return? I'm not 100% certain. Even if we might be pretty clear that they won't, you can be pretty certain that the vast majority of people there in the world won't know the details of what it is. Even if we realize some sort of magic has happened, which means, no, that's it, the others may never return. Who will know about that? Just a very small number of people. Who will trust that? Probably only a slightly larger number of people. So whatever's left of the wall, I think people will allow there, and people will probably stay manned at the wall. And added to which, if it does stay, what John has been doing is he's been populating different forts along the wall for the first time in a long time. And it may well be that people decide, okay, we'll stay here. This is a place we spent some time building this back up again. Let's stay here. Some of the wildlings may decide to just stay where they are. Perhaps some of Stannis's people might find the night fort and go, okay, well we'll stay here. It's not, I think, going to just settle back into what it was before, but also I don't think it's just like oh, we don't need this wall anymore. Let's just expand the Seven Kingdoms far to the north. Ginty is saying, or Ginty M saying, good evening to you and to you. I fully agree with all you put forward regarding the Stark spirits being bound to the Winterfell crypts, and I'm curious how the second lives of skin changers or wargs are affected by this binding of dead Stark souls. That single curious thought opens so many questions for me. Does the magic that binds them allow second lives in their bonded animal? Or is the potential of second lives why there are so many direwolf statues present in the crypts also? Will Melisandre be recalling Jon's spirit from Ghost or from the crypts? Okay, a lot of good questions. If you've not come across this, this is my working theory that the spirits of the Stark kings and lords are called down into, when they die, they're called down into the Winterfell crypts, and they are bound there by some ancient magic and linked into their statue. So, to answer the last bit first, will Melisandre call Jon's spirit back into his body from the Winterfell crypts? And I think the answer is no on two counts. Firstly, because I don't think Melisandre is going to be doing any calling back of Jon's spirit. I think that's a skin changing thing. The people who are going to be doing that, it's not her. But secondly, his spirit is not going to go to the Winterfell crypts. The only spirit that seems, as far as we can tell, that seems to go there is a lord of the rightful Stark Lord of Winterfell. Now, there's a big asterisk to this, which we will come on to in just one second, but he is not Ned's son. So Robb was the rightful heir, and then Bran. So that's the line of people who will be going to the Winterfell crypts. In case you're wondering who can be buried there, well, it seems to be the Lord and their children can be buried there. Again, Jon is not one of the children, not one of Ned's children. And whenever he has his dream, he has this recurring dream of going down into the Winterfell crypts, and the spirits of the Starks say, this is not your place. All of which seems to suggest that that's not where his spirit is going. His spirit is going to go to, because, and all of the foreshadowing we've got for this is he's going to go into Ghost. The big asterisk that I said we would come back to in a moment is that we don't, as we've already talked about a little bit earlier with the Stark inheritance, how does this work if Jon has literally written in his will to legitimize Jon, make him a Stark, and make him his heir? Does that suddenly mean that he does have a place? Does that suddenly mean that he has technically been Lord of Winterfell all this time, and therefore his spirit should be going down there? Personally, I think no, because I think that Robb wrote the will believing that Bran was dead and Bran was not dead. Therefore, Bran is the true heir, as it were. But this is where it starts getting murky, and George R. R. Martin likes it when these things get a little bit murky, because we shouldn't know these things for certain. We shouldn't understand exactly how the magic works. But as the general principle, what we've got going on here is we've got John. After he dies, then his spirit, his soul will go into Ghost, and he will start living a second life there. And it is from Ghost that he will be returning to his human body. If you want to have a hint of how this operates, we actually get, and it's often overlooked, but the Varia Sixskins chapter, the prologue chapter that we get, actually shows us what happens when the spirit or soul of a skin changer leaves their body when their body dies. And it's a fascinating bit of reading, is that he basically goes out, he tries to take over the body of Thistle, a woman. That's an abomination. She fights him, she pushes him out, but then he feels his body die, and then he kind of gets caught up in this kind of wind, and he just thinks, I know where I need to go. I need to go to my bonded animals. And that's the kind of feel we've got. So after somebody dies, as best as we can understand, their spirit, their soul kind of like leaves their body, and then it can be sort of like directed to different places. And the magic of the Winterfell crypts seems to be that kind of grabs the spirit or soul and pulls it to the Winterfell crypts. So that's what's going on. John probably won't know a huge amount about it. It's probably going to be entirely instinctive on his part, what is going on, rather than him seeking out Ghost, as it were. I think this is just him where he's going to be going. Roman Lekovets, just incidentally, the numbers are coming up after. I don't know why YouTube have done this. Whenever your usernames are coming up now, with numbers after people's names, but I'll ignore the numbers for the time being. Roman Lakovets saying, have you read Andrzej Sapkowski's Hussite trilogy? And if so, what did you think? I want to give it a try since I'm interested in that time period. I have not, I have to say. I will hold my hands up and say that I have read all of the Witcher stories that he's done. I have not read any of his other stuff. I hear it's good. It might well be a matter of trying to get a good translation, because unless you can read the original Polish, I do not know. But the Witcher books, it's actually only relatively recently that they've been translated into English. So I don't know the extent to which his other things have been translated over into English. If there's anyone in the chat who has read them, I'm very happy to pass on a recommendation or not. And Dom Livesey asking if I've read Asimov's Foundation series. I have, although it was a little while ago, I will have to say. And I do very much enjoy the TV show. It's on Apple, and then it's really good, really well made. I like a lot of things on Apple. It's one of those things that just sort of slowly dawns on you after a time, is that they don't produce as much as, say, Netflix or something like that, but what they do is very good. Right, let's go to where do we get to? Reflective Rambling saying, I hope you're feeling better. I am. Thank you very much. And I think I saw you in the chat. So, hi there. Good to see you. Saying, since it's Turkey Day here in the US, here's a silly one you can ignore. What A Song of Ice and Fire people would you invite to a holiday dinner? I'd suggest you avoid the twins. We're rather fond of you here, and their entertainment is sus. Well, again, if you are celebrating and you're in America, then happy Thanksgiving to you. As for sort of fun dinner guests, I think what I would want is just interesting conversation at the dinner table. It has to be said. So I would pick people like Tyrion and Oberyn Martell. I think Bronn would be a lot of fun. Elena Tyrell would be a lot of fun. the kinds of people who you could just like sit back and just listen to them bouncing off of each other. It would be absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that's the kind of people I would very much enjoy. But this is exactly the kind of thing I enjoy throwing out into the chat. Let me know in the chat if there's on if who you would have for your a Song of Ice and Fire dinner party. Um, Lots of people asking whether I've read certain books, whether I've read the Kingkiller Chronicles. Yes, and awaiting the third one, like everyone else is. Let's go to Ryan's Orcas saying, "Hi, Robert. Hope you're feeling better. I am. Thank you. My question mainly concerns Rickon. I think the Red Witch will burn Shireen, and the blood magic will melt. Pardon me, then will melt the snow, ice, and clear the air. However, her blood magic is not more powerful than that of the old gods. After a couple of months, winter will once again begin to fall on Winterfell. Davos um, finds Rickon and Shaggy Dog and will bring them to Winterfell, and it will be Rickon that breaks the magic about needing a trueborn Stark at Winterfell. Could that be the important role that George R. R. Martin talks about Rickon playing? Why he insisted in keeping Rickon and Shaggy Dog in the show? What are your thoughts?" Well, some excellent thoughts here. Let's start with a slight tweak to a relatively recent video I did. I did a series on Starks and Winterfell and the crypts and things like that, which may be the next one I make into one of those compilations. People seem to be enjoying when I do the compilations and pull all the videos together into one, so maybe that'll be the next series that I do that for. But one of the points I made there was winter falls at Winterfell, and it's very obvious. It's not like just it's a little bit snowy at Winterfell. It's at one point Theon looks and he can barely see the castle because it's buried under snow. We get 40-foot snowdrifts against the walls, which is, I don't know, 15 meters, 12 meters, something like that. This is massive amounts of snow. When he's walking around at one point, he puts his hand out in front of him and he can barely see his hand. That's how heavy the snow is. So there's a lot of snow, and what it seems to be sort of coming out from Winterfell, as in Winterfell was the epicenter of it. Way more snow there than there was at, say, the Wall, much further north than Deepwood Motte. The slight tweak I would come to this was what I said was that this feels like when there are no Starks at Winterfell, the spell has been broken. There must always be a Stark at Winterfell. Having reread A Dance with Dragons, I have to say the timing works a lot better, not just with the Starks having gone, but by that point the Starks had been gone for a year. So it wasn't immediate. What seems to have caused this snowstorm that will not end is actually the marriage of Ramsay to Jane Poole, who they're pretending is Arya Stark, the creation of House Bolton of Winterfell, and the announcement of a new Lord of Winterfell. So it's not just, as I say, this is a tweak. It's not just that the Starks are no longer at Winterfell. It's that there's some new lords who do not belong there, and it's very noticeable, I think. You get that scene you get the wedding scene when you get Ramsay and Jane Poole being married. You see all this through the eyes of Theon. The imagery is of death at this point. You go through there, it's like the old gods are watching, the tree is watching, the crows, the ravens are there all staring down, judging everything. It's like the imageries of bones and death and decay. And that feels like the turning point from that moment on. That's when the snow starts falling. So not just that the Starks aren't there, but also some people are ruling who should not be ruling. So that's my first, a little tweak there. In terms of the important role George R. R. Martin talks about Rickon playing, him coming back, is he Well, first of all, just to clarify, in case you missed this, this is something that happened way back at the beginning of Game of Thrones, the TV show. So before whatever you might think happened to the TV show, right at the very beginning, when they were pitching to George R. R. Martin about here's the ideas, and he was trying to get them on board, and they were talking to him quite a lot before, while they were writing season one. And one of the conversations they had was they said, and I think this was in the book, the behind the scenes book for I Cannot Kill a Dragon. They suggested not having Rick on. So there's a lot of Stark children. People might get confused. This is before the whole story's out there, so you can kind of understand they're exploring different things, and they suggest, okay, well we've already got Rob, we've got John, we've got Theon, who's being there as well, effectively as part of the family, being fostered in there. We've got Sansa, we've got Arya, we've got Bran, we've got Rick. There's a lot of these children. Can we just do without the little one? Because reading the story, which they had at that point everywhere up to A Dance with Dragons, that hadn't come out at that point. Reading the story, so they understand we're saying, well, he doesn't do much. He's not a POV character, and it's not clear that he's needed if we're having to keep this streamlined. And George R. R. Martin said to them at the time, apparently, I understand where you're coming from, but he will become very important. And we've been waiting since then to find out what is it, because the working theory from everybody is that his fate is that of the name of his direwolf, Shaggy Dog. It is a Shaggy Dog story, a long, convoluted story that is a bit anticlimactic. So what possible purpose should he have? This does make perfect sense, what you say here. The idea that him returning and being put back as the Stark in Winterfell stops that flurry of snow, the snowstorms that are happening there, because the magic can be reset, and that would give him an important role, even if he's killed relatively soon afterwards. So I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. This also is probably worth just reiterating this point about how bad the snows are. And something has to happen. The snows are so bad that Stannis is forced to be. There's a great chapter, if you read it, it's the last Asher chapter. Forgotten what it's called now. The King's Prize, I think it's called. And you see them setting off. They're at Deepwood Motte, which is sort of to the west of the Wolfswood, and they're heading through the Wolfswood. This is Stannis and his army to march on Winterfell. And they make good progress for a few days, and then it starts snowing, and then it gets worse and it gets worse, and then they were traveling at like 15 miles a day, and then it goes down to 10, and then it goes down to 5, and then 3, and then eventually the last day they can only manage half a mile. We're talking a kilometre here. They're not getting very far, and they stop in this crofters village, not because they think, oh, this is a great defensible position. It's they simply cannot go any further. And the chapter, the last few pages of that chapter, Asher wakes up and she senses something's wrong. And she looks round, and what is wrong is that they're not moving. They should be moving, and they just cannot, because they have got snowed in. And the last line says something along the lines of, they're there freezing and dying. They're starving to death. This is bad. This is every day they're having this roll call of who has died in Stannis' army. Each of the different commanders comes to Stannis and reports back on who in the last 24 hours in their area who's died. it's horrific. This cannot go on. Something has to change. So that's the situation we've got here with the weather. That you cannot imagine this just carrying on for more than another week or so. Something actually has to happen. So that's why we tend to be of the view that on the TV show, Melisandre did sacrifice Shireen in order to help with the weather, and that all felt a little bit flat. And the reason it felt a little bit flat was that the weather didn't look that bad. There was just a little bit of snow on the floor. In reality, this will end him. Stannis will be gone if this weather carries on. His chances of taking the north disappeared. His army just vanished and lost to the weather. That's how bad it is. So Melisandre will need to do something, and I would agree with you that the magic of the old gods is powerful. He, however, we know that she's powerful, and she's even more powerful than usual. She said so, even more powerful than usual at the wall. So if she does finally get this king's blood that she's been wanting all this time, she could do some pretty impressive magic, and she could prevent the snowstorm. She could at least stop it, pause it for a little while, and that will also allow not just Stannis to survive, but that allows everything else. The whole system in the north could have got clogged up. Jon at the wall couldn't head down to Winterfell because there'd be just too much snow. He just couldn't get there. Davos wouldn't be able to bring Rickon back. So all of the different movements of things going on in the north would have just stopped if this snow had carried on. So yes, the most likely iteration of events is Melisandre does some magic, causes the snow in some way. That allows them to be having their battle. George R. Martin has confirmed there will be the Battle of Ice in the north. They will have their battle. The Boltons, they'll probably have to have two battles. The Boltons will be vanquished, and if we get Rickon back in, that will reset things in Winterfell and give us a little bit of a breathing space once more. Do the unicorns at Greek Weirwood? Do the unicorns and Skagos wear snowshoes? Yeah, let's say they do. Let's say they do. And Jerb passing, I never believed the shaggy dog theory. Yeah, it's not so much the shaggy dog theory as the that's the direwolf name theory, which seems to hold, but then you have to have a what does shaggy dog mean? Let's have a quick flick back through the chat. Do you think Tywin, this is Leighton Deeks, do you think Tywin was already dying of poison before Tyrion finished him off? Perhaps Varys, I did a whole video on that one. Yes, I do think he was dying of poison. I think that's why his body, I mean, there's some pretty unpleasant descriptions of what was happening with his body, but it sounds like poison, but I don't think it was Varys. I think it was Oberyn Martell. And question from Redline saying, could Jon Connington think Jon Snow was named after him? No, I think is the answer. So I think the George R. Martin has said was named by Ned. And so this, as far as the world's concerned, he is Ned's bastard son, and he named him after John Arryn, who was his foster father. So that makes absolute sense. Nobody would. John is very common name in Westeros, and given Ned's, not just Ned, but it's pretty obvious with Ned, is that he does name his his family, well, the men at least, the boys, after people that he knows and likes and loves and respects. You get Robb after Robert Baratheon, his bestest buddy. John after John Arryn, his foster father. Rickon after Rickard, his father. Bran after Brandon, his brother. That was just what he did. So no, there's no reason for that. The only question you would have was if John Connington thought that um, John was secretly Rhaegar's son, would he therefore have secretly named him after one of Rhaegar's friends? And again, I think the answer is no. On both counts, I don't think he did think that, and I don't think he did know that who John truly was. And even if he did, I don't think he would think that Ned would name him after him. Levac saying Tyrion would bring, this is the dinner guests, Tyrion would bring the best bottle of wine available in the country. Absolutely. Kimberly Faye saying Tyrion, Marwyn, and Dario. It'd be a fun group, wouldn't it? And Angelos Lucatos saying, I'm pretty sure he hasn't read book 3. If you're talking about King Killer Chronicles, I wish I had. Right, let's just have a quick flick through. Agree, Weirwood saying unless Lyanna named him John. Well, we've got. I say we've got confirmation. George R. R. Martin, in answer to a question many years ago, did clarify that John was named by Ned. So that's why I say that. That doesn't mean that Lyanna might not have named John something else, his true name, his Targaryen name. I did do a video on this ages ago. I think there's a fair to middling chance he would have done, but she would have understood, I suspect, that you can't go around having, if you want this child to be hidden and pretending not to be a secret Targaryen, you don't want them going around being called Viserys or Rhaegar or something like that. People go, why on earth is this Lord of Winterfell calling their bastard child that? No, it had to be a name which made sense. Vladimir Kozak saying, finally caught you live again. Welcome. Also, Carl is cheating on you with a Song of Ice and Fire YouTuber's gallbladder and shaft. If you're saying my wonderful moderators moderate for other people, and yes, more power to them. It's a fantastic thing. The moderators, in fact, if you're here, now's the time to give a bit of love to the moderators because they are amazing. Please go and share a little bit of love with them. The reason why the chat is such a fantastic place is because the moderators keep it that way. But yeah, I don't hold my moderators to be here at all. They do it entirely voluntarily, and they are absolutely wonderful for it. And I'm also, I'm not a gatekeeper about this. I think the more YouTubers out there talking about these books that I love, the better. And if people go and support them, if I can support them, then that is fantastic. So yeah, all good stuff. Anonymous H said to UN, what plot points do you think gives George R. Martin such a hard time? Where is he stuck exactly? I think I've got a question on this somewhere in from one of my patrons as well. But I did a video. Can't remember what I called it now. Called something like "Why is it taking so long?" And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of reasons for it, but a lot of what this boils down to is this is a massive book, and he's expanded it out. There's 20 something different POV. I mean, just if you just take that for and I've forgotten the exact number now, but it's something like 20 something POVs. Plus, we'll have very probably a prologue from some other character. We could well go for 20 chapters, which is almost a third, given the fact that the chapters, he's writing longer chapters these days than he used to, which almost the third of the length of book one, without repeating a single POV character. That's how wide and sprawling this story is. We've got bits of plot happening in Meereen, the Dothraki Sea, Bravos, the Eyrie, Old Town, King's Landing, down in Storm's End, heading towards Storm's End. You get the idea. We've got so many of the different plot points, but it's not just the size. The biggest thing I personally think, which is holding him back, is the same thing which happened with the Dance with Dragons, which is what he at the time called the Miranese knot. He explained all of this after he finished writing A Dance with Dragons, and this is to do with his writing style. And he basically said, and this will bleed into the Winds of Winter, because the exact same issue is going on in the Winds of Winter, which is that Dany was in Meereen, and lots of different characters were all arriving in Meereen, and he wasn't sure which order they should come in. He viewed it as like all these kind of like strands of bits of string, they're sort of like coming in, and he knew that if one character arrived before another character, then that would completely change how the interactions worked, then compared to them happening the other way around. He gave an example of Quentin Martell, and he said he couldn't, initially make up his mind. When does Quentin arrive? Does he arrive well before Dany gets married? About the same day before she gets married, or after she gets married? How they react to each other will be quite different according to those, simply when he arrives. And because of the way that he writes, he actually went off and wrote forward on each of those different possibilities. He wrote a few chapters forwards in each of those different possibilities until he finally decided, you know what, we'll stick with him arriving the day before, which is what we have now. But that you extrapolate out to all of these different things. When does Tyrion arrive on the scene? Is it before she goes away? Is it after she goes away? What about Moqorro? What about Marwyn, who's arriving down there as well? You've got all of these characters. Does Tyrion arrive at the same time as Jorah? When does she leave? And each of these different threads, he was trying to work out how do they intersect all these other threads, and then work, therefore, what is the best story that I can write through all of that. He called that the Miranese knot, because he got all of these different threads so muddled up that they kept on getting caught up, and he tried them in slightly different ways before eventually he managed to get it to work. That is going to happen with almost every storyline we've got going on. The example I use quite a lot for this is the Riverlands, because I think it's probably the most it's the easiest to understand the difference. We've got a lot of different groups and characters in the Riverlands at the moment. We've got Brienne and Jaime, who are our two POV characters. We've also got Lady Stoneheart and the Brotherhood Without Banners. We've got the Super PAC of Nymeria and the Wolves. We've got the Blackfish. We've got the Blackfish's old garrison of Riverrun, which Jaime released out into the Riverlands. We've got a train of hundreds of Lannister guards who are guarding Jane Westerling and Edmure Tully, who are heading over to the Westerlands. We've got the remnants of the Brave Companions. We've got some breakaway people from the Brotherhood Without Banners. We've got who else have we got there? We've got the Hound, who is still there. There's so many I could carry on, but you've got so many of these different characters who are there, and the order in which they intersect with each other completely changes how the story in the Riverlands might develop. does the Hound re-emerge, as we assume he will, but does he re-emerge at the beginning or towards the end of this story? He's on his own a significant character who will interact with people, and what happens if he interacts with Jamie? That's going to be a massive sort of encounter if he does. What about that garrison from River Run? Are they going to? Will the Blackfish find them, or will Lady Stoneheart find them first? Could she get them on her side first? That then completely shifts the balance of where they might be and what's going on with them. And you can get then each of these threads you can add on another. So if we got Lady Stoneheart, and I'm not saying this would happen, but if she suddenly gains this extra group of soldiers, might they then decide, oh, we can now proactively go and attack something or somewhere? Might that mean that might they go and try and stop that train heading the wagon train heading west? If that happens, does that mean other people don't? And all these questions start stacking up, and it's all a matter of what order different people run into other people. And that's not something that we can plot out here. That's a matter of which order does George R. R. Martin want them to arrive in for his story. So that's what it is. It's the Myronese knot writ large. It's the Riverlands knot. It's the Northern knot. It's all of these different knots that are happening in different parts of the story. Question from Jewel Elson saying, or picking up a question from Rob Gillies. Thank you. I love it when people do this, picking up questions for others. It's very generous. Saying, I recently learned that Neris means lord or chief in Old Welsh. So I wonder if George intended Daenerys to sneakily mean Day Queen versus the Night Queen. Daenerys. Oh, interesting. So I don't know is the honest answer here. It's possible. My take is that George R. R. Martin, he loves wordplay. He really, really loves wordplay, but it's not as much on the derivation of words so much as doing or having little fun jokes for himself or nods to other writers. So this is a difference between him and Tolkien, and one that George R. R. Martin happily acknowledges. Tolkien was obviously a philologist. He cared about words and languages. And so if you would say, well, what's the derivation of this name? You can find out exactly where Tolkien got this from this root and that, and it all comes down to mean this. And you can get huge amounts of detail out of that. For George R. R. Martin, the kind of wordplay that he likes in words are, for example, and I don't know whether he intended this, but I think he did, was that you get Sansa is in disguise as Elaine, and Arya is in disguise as Cat of the Canals, which means that they are Cat Elaine, Catelyn, like their mother. That's the kind of play on words. And also, I think that Gianna being Howland Reed's wife is another play on words on John and Lyanna. So that's the kind of thing that I think George R. R. Martin likes doing. There's Abel the Bard, Bale the Bard, that kind of thing. It's not so much then what's the root of this in Old Welsh and things like that. That's less his thing, and he acknowledges it. In fact, languages he accepts and holds up his hand and saying that's not really his thing. The extent to which he loves Tolkien, always talks about Tolkien, so Tolkien invented these languages. I didn't. He happily admits, fun fact, he's only invented 7 words of Old Valyrian. It's David Peterson, if you want. He's the guy who invented these languages for the Game of Thrones TV show. Absolute genius as far as I'm concerned. At some point, I'll probably try and interview him on here, actually. I think that'll be a really fun discussion. But George R. Martin doesn't do that. He doesn't go through ancient languages and try and draw out meaning from them that much. So I love the idea. I love this, the day king, day queen versus the night king. Yes, sounds great. Doesn't feel to me like how George R. R. Martin tends to use language. Martin's saying, I'm a few days into a fever. Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, and therefore exhausted. But I just wanted to say hi and that I listen as best as I can focus. Glad that you are better now. Thank you very much. That might be Martin S. So the YouTube's doing some weird things with the usernames here, so it's I'm sort of squinting at them to try and see whether I recognize them. Martin S, I hope you get better soon. Yes, there's a sound like my mother. There's a lot of it going about. So it's it's fever time of year. Right, let's go to a question from Sean Gotland saying, hello, comrade, and to you too. Hope you're feeling better. I am, thank you. With Westeros being inspired by Great Britain and myself being a card-carrying Geordie, for those outside of these small islands, that means that he comes from the northeast, from Newcastle. I can't help but feel a kinship with the northern houses, says Sean. Admittedly, this connection is aided somewhat by the great northern houses having generally laudable qualities. I was wondering if this holds true for yourself and the guys in the chat. Do you, as a pampered southerner, I am indeed from the south of England, feel an emotional connection with the southern houses? Also, as an aside, why does Davos, of all people, have a Geordie accent? Feels like a strange choice, although the accents on the show seem to be pretty randomly assigned. Solidarity, brother. Well, and to you, but the accents. This is a thing which comes up every now and then. This is probably a lot more noticeable for British people than it is for other countries, because Britain has got, compared to many countries, quite a lot of very strong regional dialects, which means that you can pick out where in the country people are from relatively quickly after they open their mouth. If you're a native of these lands and have lived with these people for a long time. What the show has done, because Westeros is very broadly, yet there's shifts around. It's a bit like Britain placed on top of Ireland, if you kind of like squash the maps together, that kind of thing. But what it does mean is that instinctively, as British people, we look at the map and we understand the north, and we can see, oh well, that bit roughly down there, King's Landing is roughly London, and so we the Westerlands are roughly Wales. So with the accents, then we kind of expect them to roughly match up, and they sort of do to a degree, in as much as you get Sean Bean he's got a very strong Sheffield accent. In fact, he usually doesn't use usually the way he speaks is with quite a soft kind of Yorkshire Sheffield accent, but if you just sort of hear him in an interview, then it comes out a lot stronger, which is sort of more from the north of the country. And you will get the Lannisters, for example, they tend to speak in more of a kind of an RP southern accent, but it's not exact. And the more you dig into it, the more you go, well, that doesn't feel right. So Davos should be from down in the south, Lee Bottom, down here, and then in the Stormlands. But the actor went with a Geordie accent from the northeast of England. And you get the Baratheon brothers. Mark Addy has, again, a sort of a northern accent. I think somewhere from Yorkshire. I don't know exactly where he's from. But he obviously comes from the Stormlands, which is down in the south. But then you listen to Renly, and he sounds like he's got a very nice southern accent. So a lot of this doesn't quite add up. And again, I just to add to the confusion, Dunk, who comes from Flea Bottom in the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the actor there has got, I think it's his natural accent. I think he's Irish. He's got this lovely Irish lilt to him, which doesn't quite work for King's Landing. But uh, all of this makes it slightly confusing to the British audience, it has to be said. Um, so that, I think, hopefully that kind of answers that. And then you're asking whether, being someone from the south, I have more of an affinity with the southern houses, and I have to say no, because the way George R. R. Martin writes it, as you quite rightly say, he writes it so that we start off being incredibly sympathetic to the Starks. They are the people that we are supposed to be sympathetic with. If you think about who are the POV characters in book one, well, other than Tyrion and Dany, it's the Starks. We're hearing their story. Book one is basically their story, with just, Dany, who's miles away from everyone, living her own story, never coming into contact pretty much with anyone else from the mainland. And then we just have this one counterpoint in Tyrion. So, who would otherwise have probably come across as quite a bad guy, but because we're seeing a lot of things from his perspective, we also feel a lot more sympathy for him than we normally would. But no, so because of the way George R. R. Martin has written the story, then no, I naturally will sort of have sympathy with the Starks, like everyone else. Um, Jimbo Lambo saying King's Landing is likely to be more of a melting pot of accents than any other place through migration. Yeah, absolutely. But still, in the same way, if King's Landing is broadly London, and I think we should acknowledge that there is a London accent, there's sort of a Docklands accent that would be there from the melting pot as was back in the day. I just having a quick flick through. Loreley's talking about Patrick Stewart, I assume that is, saying he's from Yorkshire, worked to lose his accent for work. Yeah, absolutely. Benjamin saying the Starks had northern accents only because Sean Bean wouldn't change his. Well, I mean, we have to go with what Sean Bean says, surely. Okay, right. Let's go to question from Sean Gotlander. Just did that one. Rustler saying, assuming Bran does become king at the end of the books, this would almost certainly lead to a succession crisis upon his death, since he cannot father children. How do you think he will deal with this problem? Is a great council the most likely option, or will the throne go to the Starks, most likely Sansa's children, assuming she has any? Well, yes, this is the well, first of all, we do think that Bran will be king. This is, and I've never 100%, I think, got a confirmation anywhere, seen confirmation anywhere, but the clear implication of everything that we've read and seen from George R. R. Martin and the showrunners is that is the third of the 3 WTF moments that they said that George R. R. Martin revealed to them when they had their massive handover meeting. The others being the Hodor moment and Shireen, Bran becoming king at the end of it all. So, yes, I think we can work on the assumption that is what is going to happen. I think we should probably say that those who are putting him on the throne might actually see this as a good thing, that he cannot set up his own sort of family line after him. You're not putting an entirely new line of kings in here. We've just got somebody who can rule for a while, and when they're gone, we'll figure out what we're doing after that. That would be a selling point to some people. But I think the boring answer is I don't think George R. Martin will tell us because the story will end and then that's it. Um, Although, hold that thought, I'll come back to it. We are not going to get a 20 years later chapter where he goes, oh, I bet you are wondering what happened after all of this. So these things here are happening. Maybe he will give us some footnotes. Maybe, like Tolkien did, some sort of appendices with a few lines where we get a hint. So in the appendices to the Lord of the Rings, then we get a few lines on what happened to the main characters, so we know what happened to Aragorn. Roughly, he ruled a long, wise rule, had children, and then died. We know what happened to Legolas and Gimli. They hung around, went on a road trip, built a few things, founded some communities, and then headed off in a boat together to go west. We know roughly what it is, but it's that level of detail. So perhaps we will get that from George R. R. Martin. But broadly speaking, I'm not expecting at the end of all of this to be getting this. And here's what happens next in the story. I think he's writing to the end of the story, and that's it, wrapping it up. All that said, I think the answer is a great council. I think that the way that precedent has done this in the Seven Kingdoms is that when it's not clear who should be taking over, there should be a did I say small council? A great council. So and that happened at Harrenhal. That Jaehaerys, when Jaehaerys was old, he had one while he was still alive to decide on who was going to be his heir. So that's the way that has happened in the past, and that seems to be the way that it would work in the future. And frankly, if Bran, the tree wizard, is indeed king, holding this at Harrenhal, right next to the Isle of Faces, kind of works for him, I suspect. I said hold the thought, didn't I? I've not yet heard the detail of this, but George R. R. Martin was last week in Iceland, of all places, and he was at a literary festival, and fair play to him. He gets out so little, and an actual chance to meet with some players and actually chat about the kinds of things that he loves. Very happy for him. While he was there, he did sort of say in an offhand way, so he was asked, and as I say, I've not seen the full transcript of this, so I don't know the detail, but he was asked about spin-offs. And he basically said, well, yes, I mean, obviously we have House of the Dragon, we've got Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which is coming, both of which, by the way, have been formally greenlit for their next season. So we will definitely have season 4 of House of the Dragon. We will definitely have season 2 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. But he also said, yes, there's other things in the works, which we knew, including, he said, sequels, not just prequels. Now, the last we heard, there was only one proposed sequel, which was the Jon Snow show. This was the thing Kit Harington came and pitched to them, and was actually initially quite well received before they decided to shelve it. But if he's saying there's sequels, that implies there's at least one other one out there somewhere. So maybe there's a TV show being developed that we might see at some point, which is set after Game of Thrones. The caveat I think we have to give to that one is that this is in TV show canon, not in book canon. And although George R. Martin has sort of taken a step back on this, his view was very much that there's two different sets of canon that he was trying to keep internally consistent, each of them internally consistent, but also as consistent with each other as possible. But now it does seem very clear that there is one set of canon, which is the TV show canon, and there's another set of canon, which is book canon. So anything which any sequel show to Game of Thrones will be a sequel show to Game of Thrones, not a sequel show to A Song of Ice and Fire. We're not going to have something building on the Dornish plot that wasn't, Fagon or something like that. It's going to be whatever was actually in the TV show. Okay. Let's go to so somebody said, just in the chat, somebody was saying it might be about Arya heading west. I mean, that's the working assumption that I've seen a lot of people have, is that seems to be the most likely. If you had to pick a thread from the end of Game of Thrones, the TV show, that seems to offer the most potential, then Arya going off to explore the world seems to be good. That would suggest to me, if we did go down that route, then perhaps we might not get the Corlys Velaryon show, because that would be quite similar. A cool character heading off and exploring the world of Ice and Fire. You don't need two shows like that. So, I mean, I'd love two shows like that, but I don't think that they would commission two shows like that. So, yeah, the Arya show is probably the most likely. Let's go to Rustler saying, good day, Robert. Hope you and Dan the dog are well. What role do you think Mira Reed will play once Bran returns from beyond the wall? In the show, she simply leaves the plot never to return, but I think this is unlikely to be the case in the books. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I think it will be. I mean, I think there's a fair to middling chance that the outline of the first bit of the story will be the same, in that Jojen, I think he's a goner. I think you know where I think Jojen is. I think Hodor, we know what's going to happen to Hodor, which means that if there's going to be, Bloodraven can't be going anywhere. If there's going to be anyone taking Bran back down south, it's going to be Mira. So her carrying Bran in some way, dragging Bran in some way south, that is going to be, I think, her role. The question is, what happens, assuming they get to Winterfell, what will happen then? Now, I think on the show, I can't remember, it's been a while since I watched there, but I think on that, she basically said, right, I'm going home then. And Bran's like, okay, maybe that's them. I always think with the showrunners, they often like dropped things in which are sort of nods to what's actually going to be happening in the books. Maybe she does in the books go back to the Neck. Maybe she goes to Howland Reed. Maybe she goes to Howland Reed, her father, and brings him back, and he is the person who then explains all of the backstory. Maybe that's what it is. But I mean, there's two things in Winterfell and in the north. She's going to be pretty broken by what happened. Of that, I'm pretty certain. But someone will need to be carting Bran around. Even if he gets some kind of snazzy wheelchair like he did on the show, somebody will need to be pushing him around. He's not got Hodor anymore, so she's the most obvious person. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, she already has seen the dead rising. She will know the threat of the others. She's not just going to go away. She will stand there at the wall or at Winterfell and help defend. If that's all she's got left, she will do her bit, I feel sure. I also do think that there's a reasonable chance that she'll be bringing Dark Sister down with her. Let's go to Agalos Lukatos saying, hey, Robert, I hope you're feeling better. I am, thank you. What do you think is the current status of The Winds of Winter? An author in August claimed that George R. R. Martin told her that the book is 70% done, but this contradicts his previous official claims. And apparently she's not even that close to George, so her statement was met with skepticism. I do hope that she made that number up. Yeah, well, we don't have an official I am this percentage through from him. He has in the past, maybe I'll do a video on this at some point. I think people enjoy knowing where we're up to. If he gives another update, maybe I'll do a video then. He's done various sort of updates. He said that he'd done 400 pages at one point. The most recent is that, and he often says, "No, I've now nearly finished this character like Tyrion." I vaguely remember a few years ago him saying that he'd only got one more Tyrion chapter to go. And he often says, "I'm now doing this person a chapter from this person's perspective." There's very famously there was a picture of him. I think he was on some chat show in America many years ago from his office, and there was writing on his computer, and you could tell that he was writing an Asher chapter. But the most recent sort of update we had is from, I'm gonna say, 2-3 years ago now, where he said in a couple of different ways that he was about 75% of the way through, that he'd done 1100 to 1200 pages. This is probably manuscript pages, which is not exactly the same as actual pages when they finally end up in a book, but and he was thinking he was about 75% of the way through. That, as I say, that was, I think, about 3 years ago. Since then, he has definitely said he has been writing stuff. It's not that he's not been doing anything, and he said he's done some pages. I wouldn't wish to speculate beyond that. And to be honest, I don't want to put any more pressure on him. There's lots of people who put pressure on him. The answer is he's closer to the end than the beginning. And every day or every week or every month, he gets even closer to the end. The problem is that he doesn't just write in a very linear form, start at the beginning, go to the end. He will get to this point and then go, "Oh, actually, I want to rewrite that chapter because of something that's just happened here," and then he'll go back and rewrite. So, for example, he's said that at least one of the pre-release chapters that we've seen from the Winds of Winter, at least one of them, he's done some rewriting of. So he will keep on sort of circling back around until he's happy with the whole thing. It's not all written until it's all written, which is sort of a rather bowdlerization of a sort of a negotiation. It's not. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Nothing is written until the whole thing is written. He will not. He's not going to say. He might say, "Oh, I've now written the Cersei chapters," but then if he writes something in, I don't know, Euron, that means that he now wants to change something back in one of the earlier Cersei chapters, he will just dive back in and rewrite that. Kimberly Fay saying, picking up a question for recreational drama. Thank you very much. I love that. How will Arya and Tycho travel safely to and from Braavos with winter already in force? So on boats, I think is the short answer, which is a bit boring. Now, it is bad. There are storms, and it is dangerous traveling, but there's no indication that it is not possible to travel between Braavos and even the north. So Tycho Nestoris is heading back. We last see him in the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, and as an aside, I think that Theon chapter is the one least likely to be rewritten because it was officially published in some sort of later versions. He wrote it while he was writing A Dance with Dragons, but decided not to include it in that book, but to include it in the next book. But Tycho Nestoris is now heading up from Stannis up to the Wall, where he is going to be heading back over to Braavos with Justin Massey, where they're going to be getting the loan out from the Iron Bank, and Massey will be amassing an army to bring back over to Westeros. There's no indication that, although yes, it's that there are storms and the weather out there is very choppy, there's no indication that you cannot be traveling to and fro. So that goes just as well for Arya as it does Tychonosaurus. So yeah, it's just boring answer on that one, I'm afraid. Which does mean, though, that all of the travel to and fro that needs to be happening, it's not just those two, but even further south. Dany, presumably at some point, will be emerging with this huge fleet. We get the High Towers have gone to look for some cell sales from Lys. They will be coming back. There's a lot of travel to and fro that could still be happening in the books. None of it as yet has been affected, other than bad weather, has been affected by the coming of winter. As Greek Woodward says, moving water freezes later than still water. Saying a massive masses. Yes, that's exactly what's going to be happening. Sir Steve the O saying, good evening, Robert. I'm glad you're back on your online feet. Hello to the community. Pondering on the mysteries of Marwyn. Actually, I just had a sudden thought. Apologies, Steve. I will answer this in just 1 second. I should plug. I was told that I should plug things. I've got some because it's going to be Black Friday tomorrow. I always forget this kind of thing. But there's almost certainly, if you look at the things down there, the merch, almost certainly there's a sale. I've not checked because I'm rubbish at selling stuff. Almost certainly there's some kind of Black Friday sale. I've also got a really exciting T-shirt coming up with spoilers, with some fantastic original artwork from, well, it's not original, but I've been talking to Esach, who's one of the most amazing artists in this community, and going to be doing one of his wonderful paintings on made available through here on T-shirts and mugs and the like. So, and I'm going to be trying to pick out a few great artists and do that. So it's not just my stuff, but what I think is just excellent art that I think lots of people would like. But anyway, check out the merch. It's down there. There's probably some sort of sale going on, because there often is at this time of year. There is. I probably should bump it up somewhere, but I did some Christmas merch in the Geek merch if you're interested in that. And the other thing to mention that I promised to myself that I would remember is, if you like the videos on the main channel but would find them easier on Spotify, go and check out Spotify as video podcasts. Also now available on Apple and various other places as podcasts, so just the audio. So do go and check that out, and particularly over on Apple if you want to, because I've only just started uploading on there. If you want to leave a little review, that would be lovely. Thank you. I think that's all of the adverts. Patrons, thank you. If you would like to support this channel, the best way to do that is via Patreon, link somewhere. And moderators, thank you as well. Right, that's it, I promise. Let's go back to this question from Sir Steve the O, saying, good evening, Robert. Glad you're back on your online feet. Pondering the mysteries of Marwyn, how big a role do you think he will play going forward? He has a lot of knowledge. Do you think he's similar to Howland Reed? And when or if he reappears with Dany, will it be an exposition drop? There is something great about the little tidbits that George R. Martin drops in the narrative, albeit frustrating. So one big truth bomb isn't in keeping with the style of the narrative so far. Related, do you think there'll be anything further of many of the books mentioned in the narrative? Well, let's do Marwyn first, and then we'll pick up on the books. He has different types of information to Howland Reed. So Howland Reed knows the backstory to what he knows about Jon's true identity, which we baked into this. We know at some point but this is going to be the big reveal in the books. He knows about that. He knows about everything that's been going on behind the scenes with the turning at Harrenhal. So he's going to be bringing all of that information into play. Marwyn, on the other hand, has the esoteric ancient magical knowledge of a shy. Now, the original plan was to have Danny go to a shy. Why? To get knowledge. But George R. R. Martin changed his mind, and she didn't go to a shy. But she still needs to get this knowledge. She still needs to understand more about the Azor Ahai thing. Still needs to understand more about dragons and dragon bonding. There are three key places where she may be getting that information from. The first of them is indeed Marwyn. He is rushing over to go and find her. He wants to beat the rest of the Citadel, the other maesters, because he thinks that they will be sending a maester to go off and be with her. And he's the first. The second is Makoro, who is being sent from the Temple of R'hllor. They absolutely believe that she is Azor Ahai reborn, and so he will have information for her. And then the third is Tyrion. Tyrion has been established as actually one of the foremost authorities on dragons in this world. He literally was writing a book on the Shy Maid. He was writing a book about dragons. He's read every book he could get his hands on about dragons. He reads a lot. And as you sort of say, moving on to the sort of the second part of this, George R. R. Martin mentioned that Tyrion may see the books that Jorah gave Dany. What about the Jade Compendium, the signs and portents that Ash's uncle was reading about in Feast for Crows? So the books we will get information from and about books. Those three books, you'll remember them. Ser Jorah came and handed Dany three books. Somebody did once ask George R. R. Martin, did she ever read those books? And his response was, well, she's not much of a reader, but you know who is? Tyrion. And he's heading towards Meereen right now. So the clear implication is that Tyrion's going to arrive. Dany's not there. He's going to be sort of hanging around, twiddling his thumbs, waiting for her to arrive. And as is his way, he will find some books to read. He'll find those three books that she's been given, and he will learn something from there. Now, added to which he will know more about dragon bonding than she could possibly imagine. So he, with that information, with the information he already knows, he will be able to, this will, I'm sure, be a key part in helping him gain her trust, is if he helps her in riding Drogon and controlling Drogon to a degree. That will gain a lot of her trust, not just him. On the TV show, it's sort of like he turned up and there was a little bit of toing and froing, but then eventually she said, yep, okay, I trust you. You can be in my small council. He is the brother of the man who killed her father. He is the brother of the queen at the moment, effective queen of Queen Regent of Westeros, the person who will be opposing her, she thinks, as she arrives back in Westeros. So he has got a lot of convincing to do. One of the ways that he can do this is by sharing his knowledge. So other things, signs and portents, that this is the Daenerys the Dreamer, who was the person who had the dream all that time ago that led to the Targaryens leaving Valyria before the Doom. She, it would appear, even before then, she had other dreams and visions that was written down in this Signs and Portents book, which is, it would appear, why they trusted her to actually leave. Because when you think about it, if this random, and I don't know she exact age, or I'm not sure if we've been told her exact age, but she was young. She says, I had this dream, we should all leave home, we should up sticks, we should move thousands of miles away, we should leave all of our you know, power and influence that we've got and just go somewhere else. And they all go, okay, that is the only thing that would only happen if she's proven her worth in some way. And so she, before that, clearly had these other dreams and visions which were true. They were recorded in Signs and Portents. And then, yes, Asher finds her uncle there reading, or the reader he's known as, reading 3 pages um, or he's reading the Book of Lost Books, I think it's called, which says there's 3 pages of Signs and Portents has been discovered. So again, this ties in with Marwyn the Mage, who goes away and discovers a lot of these ancient things. So we will get a bit more information, I suspect, through that, but the biggest thing will be Sam in Old Town. All the implications are that Jack and Hagar is there to try and find a book about the death of dragons, how to kill dragons. Sam will almost certainly find lots of information while he's down there. This is going to be George R. Martin. He will not be able to resist showing us the great library, and Sam seeing and experiencing a chance to see all these books. Okay. Roman Lakovets saying Melisandre says that she has seen Patchface in her visions many times and calls him dangerous. What do you think that means? Well, the fact that she calls him dangerous is she's not the most trustworthy of interpreters of what she sees in her dreams, not her dreams, in the flames. And which isn't to say that what she sees isn't true, but firstly, as she often says, the things that you see in the flames are not necessarily an exact replica of what it is that you're supposed to be seeing. You might see an image of something. She sees images of skulls, and she knows that means death, but there could be lots of other things going on that mean other things symbolically. And then also, she seems to misinterpret some things, and she also seems to want to be clearer, or want to appear to be more knowledgeable and firmer than she actually is. There's this wonderful bit when she talks about these towers by the sea crashing down, coming under attack, and John goes, "Is that Eastwatch? Is that where the attacks are going to come from?" And you were inside Melisandre's POV at the time, and she's like, "Was it?" I've been to Eastwatch, and it doesn't seem to have been there, but sometimes these things aren't 100% accurate. And she turns to John and says, "Yes, it was Eastwatch," and it's like, you don't even think it looked like Eastwatch. Why are you saying this? So she can convince herself of some things. She can try to be convincing other people of certain things. Why Patchface? Patchface is a curious character. I will do a video on Patchface at some point, just to sort of dig through all of the detail of what's going on there. And say he's a curious character actually is a bit of an understatement. I do personally quite like this idea that she always sees him with these skulls around him, which we interpret as being it's because he did, so he sort of died and came back. What if, and this was Aziz, History of Westeros, who's thought this, what if, because he's the person who hangs around with Shireen the most, what if he catches grayscale from her and it's starting to spread? What if that is the thing? We're all looking for how is it that Shireen, how could people buy into this idea of sacrificing Shireen? Is it just that Melisandre says that there's power there? Maybe the rest of the people need more. If they think that there's grayscale, an outbreak of grayscale about to happen, and if Patchface is, casualty number 1, 2 after Shiryu, pardon me, maybe maybe that might be a good enough reason. Maybe that's why she's so scared of him. Um, the other thing is that he sees stuff, and she interprets anybody who's clearly magical as because she's got this great Manichaean kind of uh, oppositional view of the world. You're either on her side with the Lord of Light, or you're the opposition. There's no in between. You can't just be another magical person here somewhere else. You're either on her side or you're on the other side. And again, we see it in her POV chapter. She's there and she sees the man with you know, the tree man and the wolf boy, and we know that this is Bloodraven and Bran. And her thought was, is that the Great Other? And then it's like, no, maybe not them. Maybe it's the Great Other's champions. And it's like the thought does not. We know full well that they're not perfect. Those two. There's a lot of dark stuff going on there, but they're at the time they are sat there literally being besieged by the forces of the others. um, she is completely wrong about which side they're on here. But the thought does not cross their mind. They might be another actor who is involved here somewhere. So the fact that she sees him as being dangerous and is just that he's not on her side. So, as always with Georgia Martin, we should pay more attention to how she is responding to things than the truth of what it is that she's believing, if that makes sense. Um, Kimberly Faye asking, is Patchface also stronger at the wall like Mel? And if so, how will it manifest itself? Well, we don't know exactly how this works, but I think the clear implication is yes, magic is stronger at the wall. And it shouldn't just be her magic, it should be all kinds of magic, which means that him as a magical being in some way should be more magical in some way. And what does that mean? Perhaps he will start coming out with even clearer kind of little jingles and rhymes about things that are actually happening. That may also scare Melisandre a whole lot more if she thinks someone's doing. If he's clearly knows things that he shouldn't do, she will see that as being something that comes from, again, from the Great Other. If it's not from her side, it must be from the bad side. Okay, question from Laura Lay Dragons saying, "Hello, Robert. Happy Thanksgiving, and to you too. I'm grateful for your content and the community of kind nerds you've created here. Well, thank you. I'm also very grateful for this community. Um, Two questions. I recently started rereading A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time in about 15 years. I was struck by all the hints towards Tyrion being a Targaryen that I hadn't noticed the first time through. Are there clues towards this in the later books as well? Could we see Dany mounted on Dragonback, flanked by Tyrion and Jon? Well, yeah, this is something people, when they reread the books from the start, I think it often takes people aback because they hadn't, the first time through, they hadn't, perhaps a lot of people hadn't sort of picked up on it. It's only when you read back that you go, oh, there's, there's something going on there. By which I mean, in the first few chapters of Tyrion, there are so many dragony, Targaryen kind of references. He talks about when he was younger, he used to gaze into the fires for hours, and his greatest dream is to see a dragon. He's read every book about dragons that he possibly could have done. There's a huge amount of like connection between him and Jon, and them saying we're very similar, actually, you and I, when you actually dig beneath the surface. And we know Jon is a secret Targaryen. Then you get Tyrion remembering back to going to the dragon skulls under the Red Keep. And whereas when we see Arya, for example, going there, all of the language there is of them um, uh, reaching out to mean, it's literary language, but they don't want her there. It's as if the Jaws are wanting to clamp down on her. Tyrion, however, thinks they're almost friendly. I mean, he likes them. It's a warm and loving place for him. So yes, those first few chapters very strong on the Tyrion Targaryen vibes. Then it kind of peters out. It has to be said through the next 3 books or so, until you get to A Dance with Dragons, where again you start getting these dragony vibes appear, and his arc goes from, I mean, his arc has got many layers in A Dance with Dragons, but it goes from, I think the last line of his first chapter is Illyrio saying dragons to him. We are going to show you dragons, and it's like, that's where I'm going. And then we already mentioned on the Shy Maid, he's writing the book about dragons, and constantly when he's playing Sci-Vas against people, we're always getting this mention of the dragon, and how he's going to be using the dragon and things like that. And so it's starting to ramp up again. Now, you could look at this in 2 different ways, really. Either that this was an idea George R. R. Martin started out having and then decided not to go so heavy on it. He thought it might work, but he doesn't want to go down that route. Or you could say this is one of those things where it's a pacing issue. Is that when he thought he was only going to write 3 books, he had to get in early on the clues that Tyrion might be a Targaryen. But then as he realized this was going to be bigger and bigger and bigger, then he could slow it down. He didn't have to every chapter be giving us some kind of bit dragon imagery for Tyrion. He can slow that pace down a whole lot. And so you'll find a few different examples of this. In book 1, you will find mentions of the Isle of Faces. There's 5 or 6 of them, just as Jorah talking about, and the places in the 7 kingdoms, and of course there's King's Landing and the Wall and and the Isle of Faces, and it's just like as if this is one of the top places that we have to be aware of. That slows down hugely after the end of book 1, as if George Martin's going, okay, the Isle of Faces will be important, but I can calm down on putting in the references now. That can now wait. So I think that's a rather long way of saying, yes, those you weren't imagining it, obviously. There were a lot of references to Tyrion Targaryen, but it slows down a lot, and before slightly picking up towards the end, and to the extent to which it's hard to tell whether this is an abandoned plotline, like the Dany going to a shy plotline, etc., or this was something that he's just slowed down because the story's got bigger. Let's go to Ole Dragon also saying, the more I think about the Lyanna and Rhaegar situation, the more I think that Ned must have known she went willingly. Is there actually any evidence of that in the text, or is it just conjecture based on knowledge of Ned's character and actions? Side note, you've inspired me to start my own YouTube channel doing literary analysis. My expertise is more historical than fantastical, so I'm going to start with Jane Austen. But I never would have thought of it without your example. Thank you. Well, first of all, that means a lot. I'm humbled that I could be an example there for you. But good luck. Do it. When you get something up, then drop something here in the chat, send me something via Patreon, whatever. I will happily plug it and try and send people your way. Always trying to support smaller YouTubers, particularly those who sort of graduate up through Deep Geek. That's absolutely fantastic. One word of advice that I give, not just to you, but to anyone who's thinking of starting a YouTube channel, just get the first video out. You will think it's rubbish. That's okay. You will learn more doing your first video than all the next 10 of them put together. Just get it out, and then you can get onto your next one. The biggest issue I find with potential creators is this desire to make the first one brilliant. It doesn't have to be brilliant, just get it out. And as a way to try and encourage people to do that, if you scroll back on my main channel, you will find I've got rid of quite a few of my old videos for various reasons, but I've kept my very ever first video as, I hope, encouragement to people who are wanting to start a channel, because I look back on that and I cringe now. It's, I think, really bad. I talk incredibly slowly, and my presentation isn't as good. The video, I think, is only like 5 minutes long. I just have still shots from the TV show. It was a video about Tyrion, incidentally. We were talking about Tyrion just a second ago, but it's just still shots from the show, that they're up there for, I don't know, half a minute at a time, nothing moving, nothing changing, no energy to it. I think I would get a bit embarrassed looking at it, but it's important, I think, for people to understand your first one you will think is rubbish. Just get it done, then move on to the next one, then move on to the next one. But good luck. But you were asking about whether Ned would have known that about Lyanna and Rhaegar. Well, we don't have any complete evidence on this, because obviously George R. Martin can't do that, or it would give away the game. But it's very clearly marked up, I think, from what Ned thinks about it. He clearly knows his sister, and we see that he remembers a conversation when he's talking to her, and she's sort of saying, I'm supposed to be marrying Robert Baratheon. I don't like him. I don't like the way he is. And Ned's there going, he's my best buddy, and he'll change when he's married. And she's there going, no, he's not going to change, is he? And Ned's like, not really. And then when he thinks about Rhaegar, he thinks Rhaegar's not really, he's not the kind of guy to be going to brothels and things like that. And his mind is thinking, basically, you can finish the thought process for him, is that she didn't like Robert Baratheon because of the way Robert Baratheon was. Rhaegar was different. She did like that. So it he I think the clear implication is that yes, he did. If not no, then yes. And I think Benjen knew, and Benjen told Ned. Okay, let's go to a question in the chat from KPSI Bobby. That's probably not how you pronounce it. Buttoned up reader saying Jane Austen is great. We'll always watch a video about her. You have your first viewer. They're all set up for you there. All right, Dragon. Anyway, KPSI Bobby. I have a theory that Bran the Builder is actually Bran, and he's named after himself. I think he has time traveled and influenced the past. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, this is a theory which has been doing the rounds for a long time. It has to be said. The evidence, such as it is that old Nan, the language that she uses is very much merging one Bran into another. She's often like talking about one of the Brans, and who knows, they're all the same kind of thing. And then Bran himself, we know, is capable of time traveling of a sort. He can certainly go back in time and see things, and he can certainly go back in time and start to influence things. And Bloodraven has told him that in time he will be able to move beyond the trees. We don't know exactly what that means yet, but it means he's able to go there. Might it mean that he actually is Bran the Builder? I mean, it's one of those ones where it's sort of impossible to say that it's not true, but at the same time, that there's no suggestion here. George R. Martin has said that he's going to be playing with this idea of causality and things like that, mostly through the Hodor thing. But that would turn the Hodor thing from this is the horrendous result of what Bran has done to just another staging post to something even more important that he's done in the past. George R. Martin is playing with this idea of causality and time loops and things like that. But I've not personally seen the evidence to suggest that the whole story is that, which is what this would have to be if we're talking it's everything happening in a big loop because Bran caused it. Akatosh Ray saying it's hard to take Old Nan as a solid source of information. Yeah, well, absolutely, I would agree. So what we're looking at there is not, in defense of this theory, is not Nan saying something as this is the absolute truth, but is George R. R. Martin trying to seed an idea within us through this bit of writing? Madeline Tyrell Dane saying, "Hi Robert, hope you and Dan are well. We are. Thank you. I'm interested in Alice Rivers. What do you think happens to her and her son with Aemond? Could anyone in the main story be descended from them? Also, would you consider doing a Mysteries of Ice and Fire live stream about Alice Rivers?" Well, yeah, absolutely. I think um, maybe a Harrenhal one, and then maybe a more focused one in on her. Have I done a Harrenhal one here? Not sure if I have. If I haven't, I definitely need to rectify that. But so Alice Rivers, we saw her in House of the Dragon, although her role there was hugely increased. It has to be said. Now in the books, in Fire and Blood, again we shouldn't. This is written from maesters, so they have a habit or an agenda, depending on your perspective, of writing any potentially female magic users in quite a bad light. And basically, what they said happened was so she's there at Harrenhal, and when Daemon was there, then nothing really seems to happen, which is obviously very different from what happens in House of the Dragon. But when Aemond gets there, then she becomes his lover. After he has died, then she basically starts ruling the castle and has a small child with her that she claims is Aemond's son. Now, this is one of the biggest hanging threads at the end of Fire and Blood Part 1, it has to be said, because she is there saying, I've got Aemond Targaryen's son here, who is, by his very existence, he is a threat to this very fragile new coalition of who's left on the throne, Aegon the Third, theoretically, at that point. I say theoretically, actually Aegon the Third, although he is underage, so he's not actually ruling. And she is, well, people are sent to her, and she sends them back, and we're told basically kills them using remote magic. It's all very spooky dooky, all very mysterious, and a little bit sinister. So what happens? Well, we're not told. We haven't got that bit of information. We know if you cut forward, I don't know, 50, 60 years, she's not there. The castle is ready to be given to somebody else. So she doesn't stay there forever. But we don't know what happens. If I had to guess, is that I think she probably will die, and we will see this in Blood and Fire. I think the child will die as well, because I think that the Targaryens will feel the need to get rid of someone who has the potential to overthrow them. This strikes me as a sort of um, a Viserys thing. We also have, let's not forget, a dragon we've got 4 dragons who survived the end of the Dance of the Dragons. All 4 of them have to die at some point quite soon, but the most intriguing one of those 4 is the dragon Morning, who is young, fresh, new dragon, not one of these old ones who's sort of like hiding away somewhere in the mountains. This is a dragon who potentially could have dragon eggs. So, what will happen to her? Nothing huge, because we're not told of it in the World of Ice and Fire. It's not been referenced in any of the rest of the story, which means, and as far as we can tell, Harrenhal itself is in roughly the same condition as it was during the Dance of the Dragons, when it gets handed over later. So we're not talking about anything massive, but still, I think this is going to be one of the early threats to the new Aegon III's reign. A.D. Ross, saying, "Greetings, Sir Robert. I hope you're feeling better this week." I am, thank you. "I'm interested in your thoughts on the very large number of different factions and interests still at play in A Song of Ice and Fire, and how they will interact as the story reaches its closing stages. We have at present, I believe, in the north, Stannis and his men, buoyed up by the Bravosi, the Boltons. Seems possible at least 2 separate northern blocks, the Manderlys Coalition and the Mormont-Glover-Reed Coalition. We have Sansa, Littlefinger, and the Knights of the Vale going to the north. In the south, we've got Cersei, etc. And you list quite a few of these. And you're asking, or saying, it's no wonder George R. Martin is having trouble tying it all together. So I sort of sped through that because this is the point we were discussing a bit earlier about the mirror and he's not. Yes, I absolutely agree. There's so many different parties and groups going on at the moment that this is what's making the writing a bit harder. Do you think the various power blocks will be destroyed one by one, like they were in the show? Excuse me. Until we end up with Dany and Jon lined up against Euron and Cersei, or would you anticipate something more nuanced? For example, do you think young Griff may still be active long enough to clash with Euron? Might Stannis remain a factor well beyond the point where he's killed off in the show? Might the Lannisters have to engage directly with the invading others, etc.? So, yes. Actually, I just saw something interesting in the chat. Derry's read it before, saying Alice was a scapegoat for someone else's political assassinations. That absolutely very possible. Yes, thank you for picking up on that. That's definitely possible. But all of these different factions, I think that the headline is, yes, there are lots of them. And if you go through all these different factions and groups, then you would come to hundreds of them. We are not going to end up in a situation like we got on a TV show where it's very easy, where we get, here's the army of the dead, here's the army of the living, they're going to have a big battle at the end. And we're also not going to end up with, we get Cersei and Euron in an alliance in King's Landing, and then they're sort of like the last baddie that needs to be defeated, the last bad guy that needs to be defeated. That's not the way that this will work. We're going to have lots of different groups with lots of different agendas, and we will get, I imagine, in the north, as the threat of the others becomes more and more real, then people will start pulling together a whole lot more in the north, faced with an external threat. In the south, I think that we will get a coalescing of the Lannisters, Cersei, and Euron. I think that kind of makes sense. I've talked through that logic a bit before. I think we were going to get a coalescing together of forces behind young Griff. We're going to get a coalescing of forces coming in behind Dany. So we get a sort of a start of a simplification, but at the same time, it's never going to be that straightforward. Even when we get everybody kind of like roughly pulling in the same direction, not everybody's going to be feeling the same at the same point. There will be some broken men in the Riverlands, wandering around, still doing their thing. You will have maybe Cersei will get rid of the High Sparrow, but there will still be some radicalized fringes of the Faith of the Seven who then decide that they're wanting to be taking on the Lannisters. So we'll get even more new groups appear and splinter off. So yes, it's going to get complicated, and that's the way that George R. R. Martin likes this world. It's not going to be simple, everybody coming together into a big group to fight the enemy. Let's go to a Yeldenil. What do you consider the biggest or most interesting Chekhov's gun in the A Song of Ice and Fire books? Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So, for those who are unaware, Chekhov's gun, very broadly speaking, the great Russian writer Chekhov said, if you draw attention to a gun above the mantelpiece or above the fireplace in Act 1 of a play before the end of the play, then that gun has to have been fired. It's just a working, and then there's people like this because this does apply to what makes dramas satisfying. You can't just like highlight this random thing here, highlight that random thing there. Things have to have a purpose. There has to be a reason for you to be drawing attention to different things. So, what is the biggest, most notable thing in the Song of Ice and Fire? Well, there are lots, but there are two things that I think stand out that you explain if you're doing a headline to anybody about the story, if for whatever reason they didn't know it. The first is the seasons being out of balance. That is a Chekhov's gun. That has to be dealt with, addressed in some way. George R. R. Martin has made it clear that's not just a natural thing that the world is like this, that's just not going to get addressed. It will be addressed. It's like that for a magical reason, and a magical reason will undo that before the end of the story. So I think that's the first one. And the second one is the wall, is that if you have this massive wall that is just, it's huge, it's a ginormous thing going on, which cuts the continent in two simply to prevent or in defense of an attack from someone. You have to have someone attacking that in some way, or getting to it, or bringing it down, or working their way past it in some way. You can't have this wall be there and knowing the others are coming, and for them to get up to it and go, oh, actually, that is quite a big wall. Let's go home, lads. That's not going to happen. That we have to have some kind of satisfaction about what happens with this wall, and very probably that means it has to sort of come down in some way. About which I've got another question. Gadzooks saying, I asked this during the wall stream, but I think you missed it. How is it possible for the first men in the far north for them to allow the wall to be built if they didn't consent to it being built? It seems far lengthier than Hadrian's wall, for example. Is it possible that the northern nations at the time consented to it to it being built because they didn't want to move, and that knowledge of it has been lost over time? Yeah, absolutely possible. So I think the first thing we have to say is we do not know much about what was going on at that moment in time. But if you take as the best working assumption we've got is that this wall was built after the end of the first long night, then as a protection against the others coming back, then I think we can reasonably assume that the population of humans at that time, particularly in the north, which is where the others came from, will have been quite small. So this idea that you had like these hundreds of thousands of wildlings, free folk north of the wall, who was staring at this wall being built and saying, nope, we don't want that. No, there probably weren't. There was probably a very small number of them left. And was it in their power to stop it being built if they wanted to? Well, if this was being built using magic, and if this was being built with giants and the children of the forest, then probably no. this is probably like the powers that be have decided this is happening, and they could well have said to them, "You choose where you want to be. This is the best place for this war. You can be where you want to, but we're doing this here." So I think that's probably the most important thing. The second most important thing is that um, there's although it developed into a thing to prevent the wildlings getting south of the wall. It didn't start like that at all. It was a way to prevent the others, and it's mostly a magical barrier. It's not this huge high thing that it grew in height over time, over millennia. It started as, I'm sure, a very high wall, but it's not ridiculously impassable. Every one of those forts had a way through. So there's no reason to think that even with that wall, that there wasn't still good trade going on. There could have been for hundreds of years that could have carried on. People could very happily have been doing that. It's only much later, as a stronger identity of the wildlings north of the wall started to develop, that maybe that's the point at which it started to be more of a war against the wildlings than the rest. It's one of these issues where we simply don't know what was going on at the time. So it's quite hard to sort of get into the mindset of people. But I see no reason why A, they should object to it, why, and B, if they did object to it, whether that they would have the power to do anything about it. And C, that there were actually all that many of them. Let's go to also Gadzooks saying, on a whimsical note, tomatoes and potatoes, where are they? And in Essos, rice. Yeah, so there's no tomato. People have noted this. There are no tomatoes, there are no potatoes in Westerosi diet. George R. Martin writes a lot about food in Westeros, particularly all of these big feasts. He seems to delight in writing what each corpse was. And the same kind of delight Tolkien had about writing about trees, he seems to have about writing about feasts. But no, there doesn't seem to be any potatoes, doesn't seem to be any tomatoes. Why? I mean, I don't know if he's ever, I've not looked, but I don't know if he's ever explicitly said this, but clearly the inspiration for this fantasy world is medieval Europe, medieval sort of Northern Europe in particular, and potatoes and tomatoes weren't around then. So that wasn't a part of the diet of the British Middle Ages, anyone, any social strata. They had lots of other types of food, but potatoes, obviously, over in what we now call the Americas. So that's why he is sort of reflecting, and he probably would think to himself, if he did think this through, those things, they would feel anachronistic. Even though this is a fantasy world, they would feel anachronistic in that world. As for rice over in Essos, there is one mention of, I think, black rice. I think Dany, when she's offering to send stuff to one of the slaver cities, I can't remember what it is, she does mention black rice. So rice does exist, but it doesn't seem to be a huge part in the diet of those places where Dany has been. Again, if we're saying rice, that foodstuffs are there as being sort of taking the inspiration from particular lands, then you would expect there to be more rice in places like Yiti. So that's what's going on. It's just that in a because of the inspirations for different parts of his world, then some foodstuffs would be a little bit, or would feel a little bit anachronistic. I suspect is the way that you would say that. In the same way that pigeon pie doesn't appear in Slaver's Bay, and you don't get lots of flatbreads and lemon cakes in the north. Some things can get imported, of course, but that's just the northern foods are very different from southern foods. And Chesil saying he specifically has peppers, which didn't exist in Europe either. Yep. I mean, this isn't an exact science, I think, is the answer. As I said, I don't think I've seen him actually specifically say this, but that I think is the answer. Right, let's go to Aussie Greg. We often see the Hound's killing of Micah, the butcher boy, as a blot against him. But how is it different to Ned killing Lady? The orders were given, and Ned felt that he should do the deed. A better or cleaner, more northern job of it, at least. Sandor admittedly had to run Micah down and cut him pretty well in half, but it's no beheading, so it's no beheading to be sure. Jamie was with him, so it's not like he could let the boy go. And I wonder if it was a kinder fate than if the boy was left to Lannister hands, and heaven forbid Joffrey's. Much love to you in the mods. Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting, different take on this. You get that. Actually, they're wonderful if you want the two chapters, one after another, which cover that whole incident. Really well written and act as a microcosm for showing how the different characters will operate together and will inevitably lead to tragedy and death for the Starks. That's what George R. R. Martin is doing with those couple of chapters. We see the way that Cersei operates. We see the way that Robert Baratheon operates. We see the way that Ned and the Starks operate within that context. And if you see all of that, you should then be able to extrapolate forward and go, this isn't going to go well for Ned down and the Starks down in King's Landing. But you do have, therefore, you have Ned who, when the decision is made that Lady, the direwolf, is to be killed, he insists on doing it himself. And the question is that intended to be a sort of a mirror to what happens with the Hound, who at the time was being built up as this really quite not nice character? It's only later that we see a slightly different side to him. Is that what's going on here with the Hound? Now, I think the answer to what you're saying is that was the death that Micah got from the Hound better than whatever he would got at the hands of the Lannisters? I mean, probably you're right. Did he volunteer to go off and do that because he felt sorry for Micah and wanted to make sure that he had as clean a death as possible? No. He could have done it in an even cleaner way if he'd wanted to. And there's no implication that he had these kind of moral qualms about it at the time. I also think that the other kind of more moral side of his character, and I always kind of hesitate that the Hound is not a morally good character, but he does get more complex and he does show a side of his character which is more moral, particularly in protecting Sansa and Arya the further into this story we get. I think, for me, that works better from his character development point if this happens before he starts making those changes. If the changes happen because of his interactions with Sansa that we see later on in book one, not when he's just there being told to go out and do a thing. So is it, but in practical terms, is it going to be a better death that he delivered it in that way? You could argue. But he probably could have done it in an even better way if that was what his intention was. And I think personally it works better in terms of the development of his character if that comes later. And Catherine Firthith saying, "Hi, Robert. One of the mysteries in the books is how the wall will come down. At your present best guess, what do you think will happen? Bran causing it? But then why would Bloodraven want him north of the wall? Was it predetermined? The Horn of Winter being blown? My favourite is that the weakening of the Night's Watch has something to do with it. The wall will stand as long as the Night's Watch remains true and all that. At least as a condition, perhaps one among many that needs to be in place. But what do you think? Yeah, so this is not something I have to admit that I've got a firm view on yet. The reason is we know that what happened on the TV show was just made up by the showrunners. They were very clear about this, that whole they thought to themselves, you can see it in one of the behind the scenes episodes, they thought to themselves, how do we bring down the wall? And they thought it would look coolest if it was a dragon. And so that's where they went. And then they came up with, well, how do we get the Night King to have a dragon? And that's where the Beyond the Wall episode came from. So that was their decision, which seems to suggest to me that whatever it was that George R. R. Martin was going to do, they decided not to do, or they couldn't do because they'd left out various bits, which leaves open the possibility of the Horn of Winter, which also leaves open the possibility of some kind of magical connection of a kind. I have to admit, I had thought on the TV show this is where they were going. Bran and the Night King, they made that kind of connection. He grabbed, you remember, and then he was like looking at the others, and then the Night King grabbed hold of him in this kind of green dream space. That made a connection. That meant that they could break through Bloodraven's barrier and come and attack. And I thought, oh, Bran's now going south of the wall. That means that they can also come south of the wall. But they didn't seem to go down that route. So I do wonder whether that is going to be part of the answer. I think what you're saying about as long as the watch stays true, the wall will stay strong. Yes, you can definitely see that as a possible thing, but it's more like one of those ones where some people will point it and say, well, look, the watch didn't stay true. There are plenty of times in the watch's history when the watch did not stay true and the wall did not fall. So it's not it may be a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition, if that makes sense. But if we have this idea that somehow Bran has got this some kind of connection which somehow allows them to come through in some way, that does kind of work for me a little bit. The big thing, though, is I do not think that George R. R. Martin will be able to resist having the wall come down. Even if it's only part of the wall coming down, he's got this massive wall. It would feel anticlimactic in this kind of, we were talking about it a moment ago, in this kind of Chekhov's gun way. It would feel a bit anticlimactic if this thousands of years old, massively high wall is built to prevent the others from coming through, and they find some technicality and go around it or under it or through it or something like that. No, the way that this, surely George R. Martin loves to just ramp things up to 11. Surely what he's going to do is have the wall come crashing down. So the question is how. And the only thing we've got at the moment is the Horn of Winter. I don't want it to be the Horn of Winter, actually, because Sam's got it. I think the Horn of Winter being blown will raise giants from the earth, which is I think the statues in the Winterfell crypts. But there are legends that the horn being blown will bring down the wall. So I don't know, maybe. Yeah. You asked what my best guess is. My best guess is that there will be a number of things which will happen. The people will interpret the Night's Watch as having turned away from their duties. Maybe the Horn of Winter will be blown maybe the others will have something. Maybe they will show some weapon. We will hear rumors of it at Hardhome, something which they will feel confident approaching the wall. Because this is the other point I would want to leave you with. The others, we don't know huge amounts about them in the books yet, but they're clearly intelligent. They're clearly back with a purpose, and they're clearly heading towards the wall. They also clearly know it's there. So if you take all of those things in together, you'd have to say they've got to have a plan, and their plan surely will not just be, well, we'll go up to the wall and then we hope something happens. We hope that somebody accidentally blows that magic horn from all those years ago. Where there will be something that's going on there. Perhaps it will be. Perhaps they will have some huge mammoths, or they will raise some giants or something like that, and maybe they will start having at the wall. Who knows? But whatever happens, I think they've got a plan. The plan has not yet been revealed, and it was not revealed on the TV show, and it will involve the wall coming down. Let's go to I think that's my Song of Ice and Fire questions. Feel free to drop more Song of Ice and Fire questions into the chat now, and I've got a few Lord of the Rings ones which I will do, but I'll pick up some more questions from the chat as we go through. Magma Frost saying, I've got a quick Lord of the Rings question. Was Minas Morgul still populated after the Witch King took over, either by people or by orcs, or was the city deserted? What happened to the inhabitants of the city when it was taken? Okay, so Minas Morgul. This was the twin city of Minas Tirith. Now, they weren't called that Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul at the time. They were Minas Anor and Minas Ithil. And they were the twin cities of the brothers, the first rulers of Gondor. Now, what became Minas Morgul it was first attacked way back at the end of the Second Age. You know, the big battle. We've got the one that ended with Sauron's having the ring cut from his finger. That one, it fell. But then after he was, the ring was cut from his finger and he was basically gone for all of that time. The Gondorians, they didn't rebuild it, but they used this as a kind of a watchtower. And so they put a garrison in there, and the garrison stayed there for a long time. The Witch King, around the year 1000 or so, started moving in the north of Middle-earth. He took out the Northern Kingdom over a long period of time and then headed south and to basically to retake Mordor to start with. And he and the other Nazgul, they, this is around the year 2000 of the Third Age, they besieged the tower of what would become Minas Morgul, and eventually they took it. And they claimed it for their own. So the people who were there at the time, this was some Gondorians. This was an outpost there. They were got rid of, and then it was populated with what were called fell beasts and beings, or something along those lines, which is not just the flying, what we consider the fell beasts. I mean, the Nazgul used later, but these are bad creatures. So it will have included orcs as well, I suspect, but also all manner of nasty, gribbly, bad things. And that was, and then he used that as his home base, because the Black Tower that was going to be Sauron's, but Minas Morgul he could claim. Ted Beatty, not questioned so much as saying it's starting rereading Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, 10 years since the last read. It's already a joy, as always. My dad was a Tolkien scholar, and I think of him whenever I watch another deep dive of yours. Thank you. Can't wait to finish and move on through The Lord of the Rings armed with ancient lore. Well, that makes me very happy. So thank you very much, Ted. And I hope you enjoy your reread. Magmafrost 13. A silly Lord of the Rings question, you say. It's often said online that the prophecy about the Witch King's death is a joke about Macbeth's prophesied death, and how a woman kills him is a much more straightforward answer than what Shakespeare wrote. Is this actually true? Um, so Shakespeare clearly was aware of Macbeth, and this is clearly a play on it in a way. But I I would say, although we often focus in on this sort of the last point, because they did on the films, I am no man. This was like the huh? So you're killed by a woman. Oh, clever. Um, Firstly, it wasn't quite that straightforward. It was a combination of the two of them. Merry was involved as well, and in many ways, his as the way that Tolkien writes it, him attacking the Witch King and stabbing him from behind with that sword, a made magical sword from years and years ago. That was the thing that did the real damage before Eowyn sort of did the killing blow. But that would not have been possible without Merry. So this was not just a woman; it's also a hobbit. But I think what Tolkien, the layer that Tolkien sort of adds into this is that this isn't a prophecy per se. Where this comes from, this is Glorfindel, who's this incredibly powerful elf, and who up in the north when the Witch King's up there. And the Witch King's riding off, and Glorfindel just kind of like stops people chasing after him, and he says, he's not coming back to these parts. His end is not for a long time, and not by the hand of man will he fall. Now, what Tolkien kind of does is he's takes this, and somehow this message gets to the Witch King, and he interprets this not as a bit of foresight about his death and how it's going to happen, which is what it was, really. This was, we could talk about it as a prophecy or what, but this was foresight from Glorfindel saying, his death is a long way off, his end is a long way off, and it's not by the hand of man. So this is just like a bit of foresight about how he will come to his end. The Witch King seems to have interpreted this as being, no mortal man can kill me, which is to twist it completely on its head. And he saw this as being adding to his ego, is that no one can stop me. So that's the way that it's used by Tolkien, not so much as a twist ending. It's this showing us the character of the Witch King through the way that he interprets those words, and then allowing his last moments to be these moments of doubt and fear, whereas he's been going through this whole battle laughing at people, so just full of pride and ego, nobody can stop me. And then suddenly it's like, hang on, did I miss something here? And that's the moment of fear and doubt that creeps in. So his very end, that is the feeling, not him like being proud and laughing at his enemies. And then Ranabin Mitra also just sort of says, this is only me joking, but the Legends of Middle-earth playlist of yours is feeling a bit empty with no video for Juan the Hound and Fingolfin of the Noldor. I mean, even Thranduil got into that hallowed playlist before those two legends. A very valid point, particularly Juan, who is the bestest boy in all of Middle-earth. He is definitely worthy of a video. Fingolfin, overrated. Joke, Fingolfin fans. But yeah, I'm not dropping characters onto there in order of how cool they are. It's more a matter of what I get the inspiration to do videos about, as much as anything else. Is where I'm at. So yeah, do not worry. Both of those characters will get videos made about them. Okay, let's have quick flick through the chat. The Midnight Hour saying it meant that an elf, dwarf, or hobbit could kill him. I guess yes, but as I say, I think the emphasis of this, I think, should be more on how the Witch King interpreted it rather than what the technicality is. And I think that's the thing. This is why online it's often interpreted as just the technicality. Tolkien didn't write it as here's a technicality. He wrote it as here's a bit of character development. And question from Frent VR saying a history question: why are the Gardeners, such an ancient house, never mentioned in the Long Night? We don't have much mention of anyone in the Long Night. Is the short answer. We get legends of the Long Night, but within that, we don't really get mentions of great houses. The High Towers were also very probably around at the time. We don't get mention of the Starks. This may well have been before the Starks. We're told Bran the Builder was the founding father of House Stark, and if he was around for the building of the wall, and if we think the wall happened after the first Long Night, then House Stark perhaps wasn't around. We have the last hero. Who is the last hero? We don't have a name. What about his companions? We don't have names. Azor Ahai? We don't have well, we've got the name Azor Ahai, but we don't have a name. So it's not that a particular house is conspicuous by its absence. It's the fact that we don't have any or many names really anywhere. Uriah Stosh saying better late than never. Happy Elephant Day. Elephant Day? Sounds like an American thing. Enon San X saying, popping in to say Happy Turkey Day to my fellow Americans, and a hearty good eventide to everyone else in the chat. Absolutely. Derry's read it before, saying the earlier question about the hound has wormed its way into my head. Does the hound's conscience begin waking when he sees Joffrey bullying Bran at Winterfell, the lordly older boy over one lower? Yeah, it's possible, yeah. Because we don't ever have a POV for the hound, so it's really hard to know when these thoughts start to emerge. He certainly had a sort of a pride in not being a knight and things like that, which were there before because he saw what knights were like and didn't see them therefore as being particularly good, which seems to imply that he must have had some kind of he didn't just not care about good and evil, although he wouldn't care whether or not he was a knight. He clearly had a sort of moral code in there somewhere, or at least an understanding of morality. So this does go. I mean, when I was saying if his sort of moral journey starts with his interactions with Sansa, it doesn't just start there. This is not, this is a fully rounded character that clearly did have an earlier point of starting. It's a matter of when it sort of really started pushing forward. Right, I think I think with that, I shall probably start drawing this one to a close. So next week, what should we do next week? Somebody suggested Harrenhal. I can't remember if I've done that recently. If I have, I'll probably do a different thing. If not, let's do that. Yeah, so what do I need to mention? Merch stuff. Check out the merch stuff. There was something else I was going to say. Doesn't matter. Moderators, thank you. You are amazing as always. On your way out, if you're in the live chat, please do go and send them a little bit of love. They absolutely deserve it. If you are in America and celebrating, I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. If you are a patron, thank you. I hugely appreciate it. That's the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. If you're watching back later on IDG Live, somewhere around here is a link to some more live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page. And that is all for this time. I'll be back next week with another live stream. And until then, take care. I'll see you again soon.